Hello there and welcome to the channel, welcome to Nerd.World. In today's episode I'm looking at what would it be like to be a conquered world within the Terran Empire. Not a general Terran citizen, but you were some alien race and the Terrans happened to turn up on your doorstep. What would that mean for your civilization? So that's what we're going to explore in this video. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe and comment down below if you think this video is good enough. Hit the bell icon. There are plenty of other videos on this channel, Star Trek and other sci-fi franchise related. There are actually multiple Star Trek playlists, including a Captain series, Star Trek generally, as well as a dedicated Terran Empire series. And again, this video, like many of my others recently, is sponsored by my sponsor Relentless Rebels. They are linked in the description below and they specialize in Viking style jewelry. If that's something you think you might like, click on the link below, have a look around their website. If you find something you like, use the promo code NERD20 all in capitals to get 20% discount on anything you might like. This does really help me out quite a lot and you'll get a discount on something you might like. With that said, let's get started on being a citizen of the Terran Empire, an alien particularly. Now, like any empire, the Terran Empire is more diverse and things aren't as easy and as black and white as saying the Terrans are barbarians, they're always going to come down heavy-handed on everyone. Now, that's not to say they weren't like that, it's just that there were nuances and subtleties to the Empire. Not every enemy had to be crushed with the jackbooted heel of imperial power. Starfleet might not have even always been necessary as the stick. Sometimes the carrot could have been necessary. So you treat it on a case-by-case basis. From Starfleet's point of view, the Terrans individually, they're always looking for glory and power, but from an imperial point of view, you'd want to garner the most power with the least risk involved to your forces, to your empire at large. If too many Terrans start dying, too many Starfleet ships start getting destroyed in a battle with, say, an enemy like the Romulans, yeah, maybe you'll beat them in the end, but it could be a Pyrrhic victory. What if conquering Romulus means you sacrifice Vulcan, Andoria, Teleran, Denobula? Is it worth it? So, like anything, it'll be a case-by-case basis. But we'll look at this generally. What's it going to mean? Not the conquest itself, but just being a part of the Terran Empire. So let's say you're an Andorian. You're sitting there out on a glacier somewhere, sipping a cup of ice water, looking up at the stars and thinking about, maybe I'll join the Imperial Guard. I'd like to explore the galaxy. And then you hear that a new ship has just entered your system, a fleet of vessels from a species you've not really heard of. You don't know much about them. Terrans. And they're demanding that your world is now subservient to them, that you are now citizens of the Terran Empire. Rejoice. Now, what will this mean for you? Now, it's going to mean, for a start, that a lot of your freedoms are taken away. That choice you were just pondering, should I join the Imperial Guard, maybe I'll join the Merchant Navy, that might not be a choice as much anymore. The Terrans are going to scrutinize everyone that wants to join such an agency if they're going to allow it to continue to exist at all. Now, certainly the Andorian Mining Consortium, if that's actually real, were probably going to carry on existing, but the Imperial Guard, my guess is, Terrans are going to get rid of any kind of standing formal military. At least they're going to get rid of it pretty quickly after the rebellions they keep having to deal with. Now, for the average citizen, depending on the world and depending on how much resistance your government and your military puts up to the Terrans, there might not be a lot of change. Some races might be deemed inferior by the Terrans or weak, such as Saru's people, for example. The Kelpians were generally seen as inferior and were used as food and slave labor and personal servants. Whereas Klingons were seen as warlike and warriors and strong, but dangerous, so therefore not to be tolerated. But Vulcans and Andorians were controllable and manageable, and could be more easily integrated. So the Terrans would, first of all, they're going to sift through your best and brightest. They're going to go through your academies, they're going to go through your schools, they're going to go through your science academies, whatever. They're going to find the best, the brightest, the strongest, and those most willing to serve. And they'll be integrated in some capacity in an Imperial force. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily being conscripted into Starfleet. Starfleet is one of many agencies within the Empire. It's not necessarily every Vulcan of promise or use who's going to end up in Starfleet. But you're there, you're this Andorian, you think to yourself, well, I was going to join them, but now I've got a new opportunity. Maybe you could join Starfleet, be part of the new power, or you could be crushed under them. You're going to see your rights taken away. You're going to see, if the Terrans deem it, again, if your government's been too resistant, you might see healthcare, food and other things being rationed, and everything having to be approved by the Terrans. They may conduct a certain degree of ethnic cleansing of your people. You may suffer planetary bombardments as they raise cities from orbit. They may deem you to be a slave race and decide that you're not going to have a navy of your own anymore, really, that they're only going to use the best of you, and only the most dedicated collaborators to the Terrans are going to see any kind of freedom or any kind of wealth or any kind of ability to express themselves or their culture. The rest of you're going to be slaves. You're going to work in mines, you're going to work in fields, you're going to work in brothels, you're going to work wherever the Terrans damn well tell you you're going to work, or you're going to die. They may decide that your planetary population is too large to control and may decimate it or even halve it. Now in other cases they'll be less aggressive. Now they were certainly oppressive to races such as Klingons, but we know that they were less so towards Vulcans, although there was an inherent streak of racism towards Vulcans. The Terrans subjugated the Vulcans, but the Vulcans were still allowed to operate as a sort of proxy power. The Terrans worked, in a way, a lot more like the Dominion than, say, the Klingons. They didn't always under thumb oppress a race. They would sometimes simply integrate it and tell it what to do, and they would send in Starfleet if the race ever stopped being compliant with Imperial wishes. As a result, some powers such as the Andorians were allowed to maintain their own navy, look to their own defence, and even maintain a certain degree of autonomy, although Terran Imperial governors and certainly a Starfleet presence would likely be omnipresent all the time. If not enough to directly occupy or suppress them, it'd be enough to remind them that the Terrans are still around, and while Starfleet was off conquering, they need to behave themselves, because this Imperial governor is ultimately the one who's in charge. He or she is the one pulling the strings with whatever local provisional government they have got. Then there would be other cases where the Terrans would rule more by proxy. These cases, for the average citizenry, life might not change very much. As long as your race did as they were told, the Terrans likely wouldn't send in Starfleet to basically put you down, and you'd be allowed a certain degree of maintained, as I say, autonomy. But the moment you step out of line, the moment you don't do as you're told, the moment you trade with the wrong people, talk to the wrong people, they're going to know, because they're going to be monitoring all your communications. You can forget about any kind of sense of personal freedom or space. If the Terrans decide that an entire province of your planet is going to be turned over to agriculture, doesn't matter if there's 500 cities on that landmass, they're going to level all of them, turn it into farmland. If the population won't just simply move willingly, the Terrans will move them by force, move them off world, enslave them, or kill them, because it's just easier. So the Terrans, any non-Terran is a second-class citizen, and if you're lucky, you're second-class. The only people that matter are Terrans, and even then, they're quite willing to murder their own people. But that's in an internal competitive way. Ultimately, they're looking for the success and prosperity of their own race, but they put themselves first. They're very selfish people that way. Now, again, you're going to see stripped away resources, you're going to see stripped away rights, you could potentially be separated from family members. If you are politically a dissident they don't like, they're going to get rid of you, you're going to disappear. They'll make an example out of you. You might find that people are getting crucified, publicly executed, anything to make sure that the local population stays in compliance with the Empire. Now, if your race were particularly resistant, if they were particularly belligerent, such as the Klingons, your entire homeworld may be subjugated to some level of planetary bombardment or even other more aggressive, such as biological or radiogenic weapon that might be used to wipe out all life on your world. The Klingons suffered that the Terrans were shooting down every ship that tried to leave, and they were bombing their cities from orbit. Now clearly eventually they stopped this, but it was to kill the fighting spirit of the Klingons, and kill as many of them as possible in order to decrease their number, most likely as well. So for the Klingons, being a citizen of the Terran Empire, it would suck. It would suck a lot. I was going to make a two-dick joke there, but I won't. Now, in other races' cases, as much as life might not be great, it might be pretty bad, such as the Bajorans, ultimately you could live, you could survive, you could work with the Terrans. If you were willing to basically betray everything that you believe in, all of your own cultural pastimes, everything that you were, as long as you put that aside and do as the Terrans tell you, though, you might have a pretty sweet life. You can embrace the luxuries and benefits of the Terran Empire, its bountiful resources, its vast imperial strength and muscle. And you might even find that Starfleet will be coming to your defense in the event that some other power that, like in the case of, again, the Klingons, you might find that the Terrans would defend your territory against the Romulans, mutual enemies. This is ultimately because it will be in the Terrans' own best interests, but you could find, if you play ball, that things could be tolerable. The Terrans aren't going to allow the Andorians and the Vulcans, for example, to continue fighting each other. That's not productive for the Terran Empire, so that war's over. Some ways, there's a benefit. But those are few and far between, and certainly for the average citizenry, they're going to be the first ones, if the Terrans are encountering any kind of hardship, they're the first ones who are going to suffer. You are the one who's going to suffer. You'll be conscripted into Starfleet or into the Makos or some other military organization and sent off as cannon fodder, like the French Foreign Legion, to just throw bodies at an enemy until the enemies run out of ammunition to kill them, and then maybe the Terrans go in themselves and finish it off. They will sacrifice millions, even billions, of non-Terran citizens in such endeavors, as long as it means that they achieve victory. Terrans are fairly simplistic when it comes to battle tactics quite often, especially when it comes to utilizing non-Terran resources, non-Starfleet resources. They don't care if they have to throw 50 million Vulcans at an enemy to die on the sword, as long as it overwhelms that enemy. Or strategically, tactically, they could probably think up a better strategy, because they don't really care about the lives or value the lives of the citizens of the worlds of which they have conquered. You don't have any rights. You can't complain. It's not like you've got a HR department you can subspace link to and go, I don't like the way the Starfleet captain's treating me. Oh no, I'm talking to you from an agony booth. How did that happen? The Terrans aren't going to put up with it. They'll either just kill you, send you off to die on some godforsaken rock, or just shoot you on sight, torture you for fun. Could be anything. So, again, to reiterate, life under Terran rule sucks if you're not a Terran. And I'm willing to bet that even then, sometimes it ain't the best life, as Terrans are not big on human rights. Democracy is not a thing. Representation is not a thing. Diversity, any of that stuff is not recognized. The Terrans don't seem to have any kind of internal issues like what we have nowadays, where there are issues of sexism or racism within their own society, mostly because all those aggressor instincts are channeled outwards towards other species. But certainly the Terrans are not going to be benevolent rulers to anyone across the Milky Way galaxy. So there we have it. The Terran Empire, the jackbooted heel of imperial power, pressed down hard on the jugular of anyone that steps out of line or just generally irks them off. The Terrans are and were in their universe the preeminent power, and were by no means, again, benevolent or someone you would want on your doorstep. They're going to turn up like they did with the Halkans and just go, do as we say or die. In the case of a power, it might be able to offer a little more resistance. Maybe they'll wear you down. They'll seduce you into the Empire, like they probably did with races like the Andorians, who humans and Andorians, Terrans do seem to have a little more in common, but generally speaking, the Terrans treated the Andorians so badly that they rebelled. So, as much as you can see, maybe there was even some common ground. Not enough. You ain't Terran, you ain't good enough, and that's the only thing you'll ever have to remember. If your skin isn't Terran skin, and you've got antennas or pointy ears or ridges on your forehead or a worm in your belly, you are not Terran and you don't matter. And no matter how wealthy you are, no matter how powerful you think you are, a Terran peasant still outranks you. And I'd say don't bite the hand that feeds you, but realistically it's the hand that's taking food away from your mouth. But there is the opportunity to prosper even within the Empire, and if your race don't rock the boat, don't put up too much of a fuss, maybe you can get something out of it, and maybe even one day hope to achieve freedom, or even be maybe not an equal footing within the Empire, but achieve a higher status within it. As I said, the Empire rarely directly oppressed a people. Ordinarily it would rule by proxy, rule by fear, rule by sort of menace, much like the Dominion. Basically they would make you a client state. So, would you like to live under the Terran Empire? As a Terran, things for you might not be so bad. But, you know, get out, see the galaxy, conquer, oppress, destroy. Maybe not a good time, but certainly better than what your enemies are going to get. So there we are, Terran Empire. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and please check out my sponsor, Relentless Rebels. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you, and tell me in the comments below what you think of the Terran Empire, and what other tactics can you think of that they might use to entice a power into joining the Empire in a bloodless way, if they can even be bothered. Which, like, remember, they would probably only do that with a power that was strong enough to oppose them, but maybe not so powerful that they weren't going to be not worth conquering. So what other tactics might they use? And thanks for watching. Bye bye.